200 Apache warriors encircled the cabin, yet the chief's daughter looked at the cowboy with affection. Jake tightened his grip on the rifle, his eyes scanning the horizon. The small cabin before him seemed peaceful, almost too calm, but Jake had learned long ago that calm could be deceiving. He was alone in this part of the frontier world, a human scout sent to explore the edges of the human colony. Most of the planet was still wild, untamed by the humans who had settled here only a few years ago. Strange creatures roamed the forests, some harmless, some not. But nothing in Jake's experience had prepared him for the sight that now filled his vision. 200 warriors surrounded the cabin. They were unlike anything he had ever seen. Standing tall with elongated limbs and eyes that glimmered with an inner light, they moved with a grace that was both beautiful and deadly. Their armor shone in the dim sunlight, carved with patterns that told stories Jake could not understand. In their hands were spears and blades, weapons that looked ceremonial but deadly. The humans who had first reported them called them Apache warriors, a name borrowed from Earth's history because of their skill and bravery in battle. Jake's heart beat steadily. Fear was there, yes, but it was tempered by experience. He had faced predators, storms, and hostile terrains before. He had survived, and he would survive this too, he told himself. From the edge of the encirclement, a figure watched him. Myra, daughter of the chief, stood quietly, her dark eyes studying Jake. She had seen warriors fall, she had seen planets burn, yet this human fascinated her. He did not look afraid. He did not flee. He studied, calculated, and waited. There was something in his stillness, something that spoke of intelligence and courage. Jake crouched behind a large boulder, surveying the encroaching warriors. He could see their formation, a tight circle, precise and disciplined. They moved almost as one, an instinctual rhythm that made him respect their skill. But even as he admired them, Jake noted their weakness. They were strong, yes, but predictable. They relied on strength and numbers. They had never faced someone like him, someone who thought differently. He took a deep breath and quietly moved toward the cabin. Its wooden walls were old but sturdy. The door creaked as he pushed it open, and inside the room smelled of dust and the faint tang of machine oil. He ducked behind a table and set down a small bag he carried. Inside were tools, traps, and a few devices that could be improvised as weapons. Simple human ingenuity, but often enough to level the playing field against creatures who underestimated him. Outside, the warriors closed in, their movements silent but deliberate. Jake could hear their low chants, a rhythm that seemed to energize them. Myra listened too, though she stayed hidden behind the trees. She was not supposed to intervene. This was a lesson for her people, a test of the humans who had come to their planet. But still, she felt a strange pull toward the man inside the cabin. Jake moved to the window and peered through the slats. He counted heads, calculated distances, and planned. He placed small rocks in a line outside, each carefully balanced on a thin string connected to a tripwire. When the warriors stepped on them, the rocks would fall and create noise, enough to confuse and distract. It was a small advantage, but in situations like this, small advantages mattered. Suddenly, a warrior broke from the circle and stepped closer to the cabin. His movements were deliberate, almost theatrical. He raised a hand in what seemed like a signal. The others paused, waiting. Jake's heart remained steady. He knew this was a test. These creatures respected skill. They respected bravery. He had both in his own way. Myra stepped closer, her curiosity getting the better of her. She could feel the tension in the air, the potential for violence. Yet she also felt admiration. The human was not simply hiding. He was thinking, observing, planning. There was strength in that, a kind of strength she had rarely seen. The warrior outside the cabin spoke, his voice strange and musical, a language Jake could not understand, but meaning was clear. "Leave," the tone seemed to say. "Leave now or face the circle." Jake shook his head slightly. He had no intention of running. Retreat was not in his nature. He set his eyes on the small opening between two trees, a path that could allow him to escape if needed. But escape was the last option. Humans did not always survive by running. Sometimes survival meant standing firm, using every ounce of cunning and wit. Jake had survived storms, predators, and hostile lands by thinking one step ahead. He would do the same now. The warrior gestured again, then returned to the circle. The other warriors began to tighten their formation. They were ready for combat. Jake could sense their confidence, but he also sensed rigidity. They had a plan, and they followed it blindly. That was human nature too, but humans were adaptable, capable of change in ways these creatures were not. Jake checked his traps one last time. Each string, each rock, each small device had been placed with care. They were simple, basic, and effective. He smiled faintly. This was the kind of problem he liked. A puzzle, a challenge, a chance to prove that humans, even a single human, could hold his ground against overwhelming odds. Myra watched silently, hidden among the trees. She could feel the tension in her chest, a mix of fear and admiration. The human's calmness was unusual, unsettling even. She had seen warriors falter when facing numbers, yet this human remained steady. Something in her stirred. A curiosity, yes, but also a sense of respect. The wind shifted, carrying the sounds of the forest to Jake's ears. He could hear birds calling, the rustle of leaves, and the low hum of the warrior's chant. He breathed in deeply. Every sense was alert, every instinct engaged. He was not simply surviving. He was preparing to turn the situation to his advantage. Then one of the warriors stepped closer again, this time examining the cabin from a different angle. He tapped a spear against the ground, sending a vibration through the earth. Jake listened carefully. He noted the rhythm, the spacing, the timing. It was a language in itself, a pattern that could be used against them. Jake moved silently across the cabin floor, crouching low. He placed a small, metallic device near the doorway, one that would create a loud clang when disturbed. It was not lethal, but it would draw attention, confuse, and create an opening. He smiled faintly, thinking about the human ingenuity that had allowed him to survive in countless dangerous situations. Outside, Myra's gaze followed every movement. She had been trained to see weakness, to exploit it, to strike without hesitation. Yet here there was no weakness to find, only intelligence, only calm, only readiness. She began to wonder about humans, these fragile-looking creatures who somehow survived against impossible odds. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing. The warriors tightened their circle, their numbers intimidating. But Jake remained calm, adjusting a small trap at the edge of the cabin. Every detail mattered. Every second counted. Humans had survived not because of strength, but because of thought, creativity, and courage. He was about to prove it once again. Myra stepped back into the shadows, hidden from view. She could feel her pulse quicken. The human inside the cabin was something she had never seen before. He did not flinch, he did not panic, and yet he was clearly aware of the danger. There was a fire in him, a resilience that went beyond the physical. She could not look away. Jake took one final glance at the encirclement. 200 warriors, each one capable of ending his life in an instant. Yet he felt no fear, only focus, only strategy. Only the determination to survive and to show that humans, even alone, could hold their ground. And as the shadows grew longer and the chants of the warriors filled the air, the stage was set. The encirclement had begun. The test was ready. And Jake, the lone human scout, was ready too. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting long shadows over the forest clearing. Jake crouched low in the cabin, listening to the distant chants of the alien warriors. 200 strong, all surrounding him, and yet he felt no panic. Every movement outside was predictable. Every pattern could be used. He moved silently across the wooden floor, his mind calculating possibilities. The cabin was small but defensible. Windows, doorways, and even the thin boards separating the cabin from the forest were tools, not obstacles. He checked the small traps he had set earlier, rocks balanced on thin strings, a metal device near the doorway, and even a few hidden pitfalls he had prepared in the surrounding underbrush. They were simple, primitive by human standards, but they would work. Outside, Myra observed from the shadows. She could see the human-esque movements clearly through the spaces between the trees. He seemed almost calm, as if he were playing a game rather than facing overwhelming numbers. The aliens surrounding the cabin were tense, sensing the human's presence, waiting for him to make a mistake. Yet Myra felt a stirring of admiration. There was something in the way he moved, the way he calculated every step. He was clever. He was adaptable. One of the warriors, larger than the rest and adorned with extra markings, stepped closer to the cabin. He raised a hand and tapped a drum-like instrument hanging from his shoulder. The low beat vibrated through the clearing. The other warriors paused, listening. It was a signal. A test. Jake crouched behind the table, watching the warrior's movements through the slats of the cabin window. He had seen similar behavior in predators back on Earth. Strength alone did not make one successful. Observation, timing, and clever tactics could turn the tide. He adjusted one of the rocks in the trap line, making sure it would fall exactly when needed. A slight breeze rustled the leaves, and he felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand. Not from fear, but from awareness. Every second mattered now. Then came the first step. One warrior, cautious but confident, stepped onto the trap line. Instantly, a rock toppled, clanging loudly as it hit the ground. The sound echoed through the forest. The warrior froze, then barked a command. Other warriors shifted slightly, unsure. The human was clever. Myra's eyes widened. Even a simple device, something so small, had unnerved the creatures. Jake moved to another window, preparing the next trap. He had learned from humans across generations that survival was about using what you had, not wishing for more. His small bag of tools, a few wires, rocks, and devices were enough. Humans had thrived in deserts, forests, and frozen plains, using nothing but ingenuity and courage. Now, on an alien world, the same principles applied. The warrior outside the cabin tried to adjust his approach, moving carefully around the trap. Jake observed, noting his rhythm, his tendencies. Another trap, set in the underbrush, awaited. A tripwire connected to a small set of bells would alert him to any further movement. It was not a weapon, but it was enough to give him an advantage. Myra could not look away. She had trained to detect weakness, to exploit it, to strike without hesitation. Yet here she saw none. Only intelligence, only calculation, only calm determination. She took a step closer to the edge of the trees, curiosity overcoming caution. Suddenly, a loud clang erupted from the doorway. The largest warrior had moved too close. Jake had anticipated it perfectly. He ducked low, letting the noise draw attention, while silently preparing a smoke device he had fashioned from small chemicals in his kit. The smoke would confuse and slow the warriors, giving him room to maneuver. The smoke hissed and expanded, curling into the doorway like a living thing. The warriors hesitated, uncertain. They were strong, yes, but not used to humans' creativity. Their rigid training relied on strength and numbers. Jake's unexpected tactics disrupted that balance. Inside the cabin, Jake moved with precision, checking each window, each door. He could hear the warriors outside talking in their strange musical language. Commands were given. Confusion spread. Myra watched closely. The human was not simply reacting. He was controlling the battlefield with his mind, predicting movements, creating distractions, and using every tool at his disposal. One warrior tried to force the door open, stepping into the smoke. Jake had anticipated this. With a swift motion, he triggered a second device, a small flash of light that startled the intruder. The warrior stumbled, catching himself just in time. The others outside paused, unsure. Jake's simple tools, his human ingenuity, had created hesitation among 200 warriors. Myra's heart raced. She had seen warriors face danger and panic, yet she had never witnessed cleverness wielded with such precision. Humans were fragile in appearance, but their minds were sharp, adaptable, and brave. She felt a growing respect for the man inside the cabin. The smoke cleared slightly, and Jake took a moment to catch his breath. He needed a plan, not just for defense but for survival. Strength alone would not save him if the warriors regrouped. He needed to think one step ahead. Outside, the alien chief's daughter signaled subtly to a few warriors, indicating a pause. Myra's respect for Jake was growing, though she kept it hidden. She could not interfere openly, but she could observe and perhaps learn. Humans were different. They did not rely solely on power. They relied on thought, on strategy, on courage. Jake moved silently to the back of the cabin, where a narrow window overlooked a dense thicket. He set a small pulley device he had built, designed to knock over a stack of barrels if anyone tried to approach from that side. Simple, basic, yet effective. Humans had survived with less, and this was more than enough. A sudden shout outside drew his attention. One warrior had stepped on a hidden tripwire, triggering another small noise device. Chaos spread among the warriors. They were strong, yes, but rigid. Their coordination faltered under unexpected conditions. Jake smiled faintly. This was the advantage humans had: adaptability. Myra could not contain her curiosity any longer. She stepped closer to the edge of the forest, watching every detail. The human moved with grace, but not grace of the body, grace of the mind. Every trap, every device, every motion was deliberate. Humans were small, fragile, yet capable of things larger creatures could not imagine. Jake's traps worked perfectly. Rocks toppled, metal devices clanged, and the occasional flash startled the intruders. He stayed low, moving silently, always observing, always thinking. Outside, the warriors regrouped but were wary. Their confidence was shaken. They had never faced a creature who could outthink them. Myra's admiration grew. She had trained with the best warriors of her people, yet here was a single human, capable of holding his own against 200. It was not physical strength that made him remarkable. It was courage, creativity, and intelligence. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with orange and purple hues. Jake crouched in the cabin, preparing for the next phase. He would need to negotiate soon. Strength alone would not end the standoff. But for now, he had shown that humans were not weak, that even alone they could resist, survive, and influence the outcome. Myra stepped back into the shadows, her mind racing. She could feel a connection forming, not of love but of understanding. Respect. Humans were underestimated by most creatures, yet here was proof that they could be clever, resourceful, and courageous. Jake peered through the window one last time before night fully fell. The warriors were still outside, circling, confused and cautious. He adjusted a small device, ensuring it would alert him to any movement while he rested briefly. Humans had survived in impossible conditions before. They had thrived against predators, storms, and hostile lands. This was no different. As darkness settled over the clearing, the warriors' chants grew quieter, replaced by low murmurs of discussion. Jake lay low, calm, and alert. Myra watched silently, hidden but attentive. The night would be long, and the battle of minds had just begun. Humans, Jake knew, survived not through brute force alone, but through courage, ingenuity, and the ability to think beyond instinct. And tonight, he would prove it once again. Night had fully settled over the forest. Shadows stretched long, weaving through the alien trees like living creatures. The moon, pale and distant, cast a silver glow on the clearing. The warriors outside the cabin had become quieter, their chants fading into murmurs. Jake remained alert, crouched low, but his mind was calm. The traps had slowed their advance and scattered their formation. Yet he knew that tonight would require more than clever devices. Survival now demanded understanding, negotiation, and human ingenuity of a different kind. Inside the cabin, Jake quietly checked his makeshift perimeter. Every window, every door, every crevice had a small device or trap. He had done all he could to delay the warriors. Now it was time to plan the next step. Strength could keep him alive for the night, but humans did not survive by force alone. They survived by thinking, by reasoning, and by connecting, even with those who seemed their enemies. Outside, Myra watched from the shadows. Her curiosity had grown into something more profound than simple admiration. There was intelligence in the human's actions, a calm determination that she had rarely seen in any creature. Most beings relied on instincts or strength. This human relied on thought, on strategy, on understanding the environment and the beings around him. She stepped closer to the cabin, moving silently, careful not to alert the warriors. Jake's sharp ears caught the faintest rustle. He crouched lower, peering through the window. A shadow moved along the edge of the clearing, careful, deliberate. He recognized it immediately, not a warrior, not a predator, but someone intelligent, someone watching, studying like he was. "Myra," he whispered softly, testing the sound. He wasn't sure if she could understand, but instinct told him that humans and most intelligent beings could detect intent as easily as words. The shadow paused. The human's calm voice carried no threat, only awareness. The figure stepped closer. Myra hesitated for a moment, then moved toward the cabin. Every instinct told her this human could be dangerous, yet every part of her being wanted to see him more closely. She slipped through the forest, silent and careful, until she reached the edge of the clearing. The traps had slowed the warriors, giving her a path free of danger. Jake noticed her movement immediately, yet he did not panic. Humans had survived by observation as much as by action. He watched, waited, and did not make sudden moves. When Myra reached the cabin wall, he gestured to a small opening near the roof, a gap she could use to enter without triggering any traps. Myra's eyes widened in surprise. The human knew she was there. And more than that, he had accounted for her safety without a word, without a threat. That, she realized, was the difference between humans and most other species she knew. Humans thought beyond themselves, beyond instinct. Carefully, Myra climbed through the opening, landing softly on the wooden floor. Jake watched her silently, his eyes calm, his hands empty. He did not make a move to strike. Instead, he gestured to the floor beside him, inviting her to sit. She hesitated, then moved closer, keeping her eyes on him the entire time. "Why are you here?" Jake asked, his voice low but steady. "I am the chief's daughter," she said simply. "I am supposed to observe, to see how humans behave when surrounded. To see if you are truly as clever as they say." Jake nodded slowly. "Then you already know the answer. Humans survive not because they are the strongest, but because they can think, adapt, and learn." Myra studied him, noticing the calm in his expression, the careful attention to every detail. "Your traps, simple yet effective. You did not just react, you anticipated." Jake smiled faintly. "Experience. Humans have survived in deserts, jungles, frozen lands. We rely on brains, not just brawn, and we learn from every mistake." Myra's gaze softened. She had trained to see strength, skill, and courage, but this was different. The human strength was invisible, woven into his mind, into his patience, into his understanding of the situation. She felt respect, a feeling unfamiliar yet profound. Outside, the warriors remained vigilant. Their numbers were intimidating, but the standoff had slowed them. They sensed the change in the atmosphere, though they could not understand it fully. The human inside the cabin and the chief's daughter moving within it created a new dynamic, one they had not prepared for. Jake leaned forward slightly. "Your people are disciplined, strong. But strength alone will not solve this. You and I, we could find a way to avoid needless loss for both sides." Myra's eyes widened. You mean a truce? Jake shook his head. Not exactly a solution. Something that allows your warriors to maintain honor while avoiding unnecessary danger. Humans survive because we adapt. Maybe we can show your people the same. Myra considered his words. She had grown up in a culture that prized courage, valor, and victory in battle. Yet this human spoke of something different, something that balanced honor with survival. Her admiration deepened. You are clever, she said finally. Most humans would have tried to fight or flee. You understand, Jake smiled. Observation first, action second, always. For a moment, silence filled the cabin. The only sounds were the distant murmurs of the warriors outside and the soft rustle of leaves in the forest. Myra's mind raced, thinking about the human, his traps, his calmness, and the intelligence that radiated from him. You have survived against impossible odds, she said softly. 200 warriors, and yet here you are unbroken. Jake's eyes met hers. Humans survive because we think beyond the immediate danger. We improvise, we adapt. And we do not give up even when the odds are against us. Myra nodded slowly. Then perhaps we can learn from each other. Jake considered her words carefully. Perhaps, but first we need to ensure your warriors do not attack tonight. Then we can talk. Myra smiled faintly. She had seen humans in many reports, many stories, but she had never encountered one in person. And now, in this cabin, she realized that humans were not just survivors. They were thinkers, innovators, and, in their own way, teachers. Jake moved to a window, peering out at the warriors. He could see the tension in their posture, the hesitation in their steps. The standoff had changed. The humans' cleverness had created doubt, uncertainty, and respect among the alien warriors. Your people will hesitate, he said softly. They respect strength, yes, but they also respect intelligence. And tonight they see both in us. Myra nodded. She could sense it too, the subtle shift in the warrior's behavior. The night, once filled with tension and the threat of violence, now carried the possibility of understanding. Jake moved to the traps again, checking them carefully. He had prepared for the night, but he also knew that the key to survival lay in diplomacy and empathy. Humans had thrived not because we dominated others, but because we could connect, communicate, and adapt. Myra watched him silently, marveling at his focus, his patience, and his calm determination. She realized that humans were underestimated not because they were weak, but because their true strength was hidden in thought, courage, and adaptability. The night deepened and the moon rose higher. The warriors remained outside, their formation still tight, yet hesitant. Jake adjusted his position, ensuring he could monitor every movement while remaining protected. Myra stayed close, listening, learning, and slowly beginning to understand the human way of thinking. Tomorrow, Jake said softly, we can show them that violence is not the only way. That brains and courage together can achieve what strength alone cannot. Myra's eyes met his. She could feel the truth in his words. She had trained to see warriors fight, to see battles won with skill and strength. But this human, he had survived not through force but through thought, ingenuity, and calm determination. I will help, she said finally. In my way, quietly, without your warriors knowing. Jake nodded. Then we have a chance, a small chance but enough. The night stretched on, the forest quiet except for the occasional rustle of leaves. The cabin, once a simple shelter, had become a symbol, a place where humans and aliens could meet, observe, and perhaps learn from each other. For Jake, it was another lesson in survival, another test of human ingenuity. For Myra, it was a revelation, a glimpse of a species she had underestimated, now showing courage, intelligence, and the ability to adapt against impossible odds. And as the night wore on, a silent understanding formed between them. Humans survived not just because they were clever, but because they could connect, empathize, and adapt. Myra realized that this human, alone in a cabin surrounded by 200 warriors, embodied all of that. The first stage of the standoff had passed, but the true challenge, the negotiation, the test of minds, was only beginning. And for the first time, Myra felt not fear or suspicion, but respect and curiosity. The first light of dawn filtered through the alien trees, painting the forest in pale gold and green. The clearing around the cabin was quiet, the 200 warriors still maintaining their circle, but their rhythm had changed. They no longer moved with complete confidence. Instead, there was hesitation, small pauses, uncertainty in their steps. Jake had created it not through strength, but through clever planning and calm observation. Inside the cabin, Jake crouched near the window, studying the warriors. He had slept only a little during the night, remaining alert. The traps had slowed their movements, scattered their focus, and created small disturbances that hinted at a more dangerous force than the humans appeared. But now, a bolder move was required. A stand. A demonstration. A chance to show that brains, courage, and creativity could turn the tide. Myra, still hidden, observed Jake's preparation. She had seen the knight's clever devices and diversions, but now he was planning something more complex, more daring. He was not just reacting, he was controlling the battlefield, thinking multiple steps ahead. Myra's admiration for the human had deepened into something stronger, respect for his mind, his courage, and his ingenuity. Jake moved to the floor, retrieving a few small devices from his bag. They were simple, almost crude, but their effectiveness was undeniable. A tripwire here, a small bell there, and a reflective device near the tree line. These were not weapons in the traditional sense, but distractions, illusions, and tools of calculation. Every step of the warriors could now be anticipated, influenced, and redirected. Outside, Myra's eyes followed each motion. She could sense the subtle shift in the warriors' formation. The chief's warriors were disciplined, yes, but rigid. Their strategy relied on numbers, intimidation, and strength. They had never faced someone who thought like this human, who used the environment itself as a weapon. Jake's eyes scanned the tree line. A small branch, a fallen log, even the shadows of trees, all could be manipulated to create the illusion of movement and presence. The human mind had an uncanny ability to see possibilities others could not. And tonight, that ability would be tested. Myra stepped closer to the cabin, silent as a shadow. Jake noticed her presence but did not move to confront her. Instead, he gestured toward a small opening, inviting her inside. She slipped through carefully, landing softly on the wooden floor. Together, they worked quickly, checking traps and recalculating positions. "Your people will respect this," Jake said quietly, "but only if we show them control and intelligence. Not force, not fear, control." Myra nodded. "I will help you, quietly. I know the terrain, I know how they think. I can guide them without them noticing." Jake's eyes met hers, full of calm determination. "Then we are ready." The sun rose higher, illuminating the clearing. The warriors began their routine inspection, moving closer to the cabin. Jake crouched low, ready for the first phase. He released a small rope attached to a weight, which knocked over a stack of barrels outside. The sudden noise startled the warriors, drawing their eyes away from the cabin. Myra guided Jake's attention to another weak point in the warriors' formation. "Here," she whispered, pointing toward a narrow gap between two trees. "They will naturally step there. They cannot see the wire you placed." Jake adjusted the trap, ensuring maximum effect. As predicted, a warrior stepped on the tripwire. A small bell rang loudly, echoing through the clearing. Confusion spread. The disciplined circle wavered, their rhythm broken. Jake smiled faintly. Small actions, small diversions had created the first cracks in the overwhelming force surrounding him. The warriors regrouped quickly, their training forcing them back into formation. But the pause had been enough. Jake had gained insight into their thinking, their reactions. Humans had survived in impossible circumstances for centuries by observing, learning, and adapting. Now, He would demonstrate that adaptability could challenge even the most disciplined alien warriors. Myra moved quietly to the edge of the cabin, signaling to Jake. She had identified the chief's position among the warriors, the one who held command. Jake nodded, understanding the importance. Influence the chief, and the others would follow. Humans often survived by targeting strategy, not strength, by turning leaders into allies or at least into cautious observers. Jake stepped out briefly, moving to a safe position visible to the chief but protected by the cabin's shadow. He raised his hands, a gesture of peace and intelligence. His voice carried over the clearing. "I am not your enemy," he said clearly, confidently. "I wish no harm, but I am not weak. I am human and I will survive. Observe and you will see reason." Myra's eyes widened as the chief's head turned, observing Jake. A murmur passed through the warriors. Humans were small, yes, but their presence carried confidence, intelligence, and courage. The chief hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Jake continued, "You have numbers. Strength, discipline, but I have strategy, intelligence, and the will to survive. Watch carefully and you may learn." The warriors shifted uneasily. This human did not beg, did not strike. He demonstrated control, observation, and confidence. The chief, cautious and proud, raised a hand to halt the warriors. Myra's subtle movements guided Jake's next actions. A reflective device caught the morning sun, casting sudden flashes near the tree line. A group of warriors froze, thinking another force was approaching. Small traps triggered sounds in the forest, rustling leaves and echoing movement. The warriors' formation wavered again, and the humans' influence over the battlefield became clear. Myra watched, amazed. He had turned a desperate defense into an organized, clever strategy. Humans, fragile in appearance, could manipulate situations with precision, foresight, and courage. She realized that the human before her was not just surviving, he was teaching, demonstrating the power of intelligence over brute force. Jake's voice carried again. "Observe the traps, the environment, the signals. Strength alone does not win battles. Adaptation and creativity do." The chief studied him, noting the confidence and precision. Slowly, he gestured to his warriors to pause, to hold. For the first time, the 200 warriors hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Jake had not struck them, yet he had demonstrated superiority in a way they could understand. Myra stepped closer to Jake, whispering, "They listen. They respect what you have done. But it is not complete. You must show them a final move, a demonstration of control." Jake nodded. He had planned for this. A small pulley device hung from a tree, connected to a reflective panel and a set of simple alarms. With a single release, it would create the illusion of movement and strength far larger than any human could possess. He pulled the cord. Immediately, the panel spun, catching the sunlight and flashing across the clearing. Bells jingled, ropes snapped into motion, and leaves rustled as if a storm had passed. The warriors froze. Their discipline, their confidence, had faltered under the clever manipulation of environment and human thought. Myra's eyes shone with admiration. The human had done more than survive. He had controlled perception, demonstrated intelligence, and commanded respect without striking a blow. The chief stepped forward, raising his hands. The warriors paused instantly. His eyes met Jake's. The human was brave, clever, and unyielding. He had not relied on numbers or strength. He had relied on thought, courage, and ingenuity, the true hallmarks of human survival. Jake lowered his hands, bowing slightly in respect. "I ask only understanding. I will not harm you and neither will my companions, but I am human and we survive by thinking beyond the obvious." Myra felt a thrill of awe. Humans were underestimated, yes, but they were more than they appeared. They could survive, influence, and lead with intelligence and courage. The chief's nod signaled a temporary ceasefire. The warrior's stance relaxed slightly and tension shifted into curiosity. Jake turned to Myra. "This is the turning point. We show them that humans are not enemies, only clever survivors. They will respect strategy, not fear, and that is how humans thrive. Myra nodded. She had seen it firsthand. Humans, though physically smaller and seemingly fragile, could outthink, outmaneuver, and survive against overwhelming odds. Her admiration deepened into understanding. The warriors began to shift their formation, still cautious but less rigid. The chief watched Jake, acknowledging the human's intelligence and courage. He understood that strength alone did not guarantee survival or respect. Jake crouched back near the cabin, observing the changing atmosphere. The standoff had moved beyond simple confrontation. Humans had demonstrated a unique power, the power of mind, strategy, and courage. The warriors outside were beginning to see that even 200 could be influenced by the careful, clever actions of one. Myra remained at his side, guiding him silently, ensuring the subtle signals reached the chief and the warriors without betraying her own position. Together, they had turned a desperate situation into a demonstration of human ingenuity, patience, and bravery. The forest, once tense and threatening, now carried a new energy. It was no longer only about power and numbers. It was about intelligence, observation, and courage, the true hallmarks of human survival. Jake looked at Myra. Tomorrow, we will move toward understanding. For now, we have shown them what humans can do. Myra nodded. She had witnessed human brilliance firsthand and could never underestimate them again. The turning point had come, and the warriors' respect, though cautious, had been earned. The sun climbed higher, and the clearing grew warm with morning light. Humans had survived the night not with weapons, but with minds. And for the first time, the alien warriors saw that intelligence, courage, and ingenuity could rival any strength, any number, and any weapon. The battle was not over, but the tide had shifted, and humanity, once underestimated, had taken the first step toward earning respect among the stars. The sun climbed fully into the sky, spilling warm light over the forest and the clearing around the cabin. The 200 warriors remained, but their stance had shifted. Where there had been tension, fear, and readiness to strike, now there was cautious observation. They moved more slowly, communicating in soft murmurs that carried the weight of calculation rather than aggression. Jake crouched near the cabin window, watching the warriors. The turning point of the night and early morning had proven humans' ingenuity and courage. 200 warriors had circled the cabin, prepared to overwhelm him. Yet here he was, calm, alert, and unscathed. The difference was not in weapons or strength, but in thought, adaptability, and strategy. Myra remained close by, hidden in the cabin's shadows but fully engaged. She had watched the entire encounter unfold, witnessing firsthand the human's brilliance. The respect she felt had grown into a quiet admiration. Humans were underestimated, yes, but they were capable of incredible courage and intellect. This scout, had demonstrated what her people seldom saw, a mind that could match strength with creativity. Jake spoke softly, his voice carrying over the quiet clearing. The warriors are strong, disciplined, and fearless, but they are not invincible. Intelligence, observation, and courage can shape outcomes that brute force alone cannot. Myra stepped forward slightly, revealing herself to him. She moved carefully, ensuring the warriors did not notice. Jake looked at her and nodded in acknowledgement. They had both seen the value of collaboration, even in this delicate situation. "You have proven your point," she said, her voice low but firm. "Your mind, your patience, it has earned respect, not only from me but from my people. They sense it." Jake smiled faintly. "Humans survive by thinking, by adapting, by refusing to be controlled by fear or numbers alone. I did not fight your warriors. I showed them strategy and courage. That is how we thrive." Outside, the chief watched intently. His warriors had stopped their approach, forming a loose perimeter rather than a tight circle. They whispered among themselves, observing the human who had held his ground without striking, who had manipulated the environment, and who had calmly faced overwhelming odds. The chief, proud and cautious, considered the human's intelligence carefully. Myra gestured subtly toward the chief, encouraging him to move closer. She had seen the respect in his eyes, and now she wanted to ensure the human's efforts were acknowledged. The chief approached, moving with deliberate caution. Every step carried dignity and authority, yet also curiosity. Jake remained still, crouched but upright, ready to respond if needed. He had faced countless threats in his life, wild predators, storms, hostile terrain, but this encounter required a different kind of bravery. Not physical, but mental. He had to demonstrate respect while maintaining strength of mind. The chief stopped at the edge of the clearing, looking directly at Jake. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the chief raised a hand in a gesture that was both acknowledgement and cautious approval. His warriors paused, taking their cue. The standoff had shifted from confrontation to observation. Myra moved closer to Jake, whispering, "You have shown them that humans are not enemies. You have shown that thought, patience, and courage matter." Jake nodded. "Now we can talk. Humans survive not only through strategy but through connection and understanding. If we communicate, there can be no unnecessary bloodshed." The chief raised his voice, speaking in his melodic, alien language. Myra translated softly for Jake. "He acknowledges your ingenuity, your courage. He is willing to listen, to understand your intentions." Jake exhaled quietly. This was the moment he had worked toward, not victory through force but through respect and understanding. "I wish no harm," he said clearly. "I seek only survival and perhaps a way for our peoples to coexist peacefully." The chief studied him carefully, then nodded once more. "Humans are clever," Myra translated. "Clever and brave. You have earned respect, not by fighting but by showing understanding and intelligence." A ripple of murmurs passed through the warriors. They had watched the human throughout the night and morning, noting his careful traps, his observation of their patterns, and his calm determination. They understood now that this human was different, resilient, courageous, and worthy of acknowledgement. Myra stepped fully into the clearing, standing beside Jake. "They see now," she said softly. "Your people, your kind humans, are more than we thought. You survive not because you are the strongest, but because you think, adapt, and endure." Jake looked around the clearing, observing the subtle changes. The warriors were no longer aggressive. The chief's body language spoke of respect, not fear. Humans, he knew, had survived for centuries because of precisely this: intelligence, courage, and the ability to turn observation into action. "I propose a temporary truce," Jake said, addressing the chief through Myra. "Our peoples can coexist here peacefully. We will respect your land, and in return you will respect ours." The chief considered the words, then raised a hand again. The warriors paused and shifted, signaling their agreement. Myra smiled faintly, knowing that the human strategy had succeeded. The truce was in place, not imposed, not forced, but earned through cleverness, courage, and calm intelligence. Jake lowered his stance, showing further respect. "We can learn from each other," he said quietly. "Humans and your people both have strengths. Together we can survive and thrive." Myra's heart swelled with admiration. She had never seen a human act like this, calm, courageous, and clever. The warrior in front of her had survived 200 warriors not by fighting, but by thinking, observing, and earning respect. The chief approached closer, tilting his head slightly. Myra translated again. "He says he will allow your people to remain. He respects your intelligence and courage. He asks only that we observe and learn from each other, not fight unnecessarily." Jake nodded. "That is all I ask." He looked at Myra. "Your help was invaluable. Together we have shown them what humans can do, not through violence but through mind and courage." Myra smiled, feeling pride and respect. "You have shown more than strength. You have shown wisdom, patience, and ingenuity. That is rare, even among my people." The warriors relaxed further, forming a loose circle rather than a tight one. Their vigilance remained, but their fear and aggression had diminished. Jake's presence, his courage, and his careful planning had changed the dynamics completely. Humans were no longer merely small creatures in a strange world. They were beings capable of intelligence, strategy, and influence. Jake moved toward the center of the clearing, signaling for calm and understanding. The chief watched closely, then mirrored the gesture. A silent acknowledgement passed between them, a recognition that respect had been earned. Myra approached Jake fully, standing beside him. "Your people have survived impossible odds before," she said softly. "Today, you have proven that survival comes not just from strength, but from courage, ingenuity, and understanding." Jake smiled faintly. "And today, we have shown that humans can earn respect, even among those who vastly outnumber us. We survive because we think, because we adapt, and because we refuse to give up." The chief nodded slowly, speaking to his warriors. Myra translated. "He acknowledges the human's courage. He accepts the truce. He recognizes that intelligence and adaptability are as important as strength." A murmur passed through the warriors, a mix of awe and newfound respect. They had faced humans before, yet none had displayed such calm, clever courage. The encounter had changed their perception. Humans were not merely fragile beings, they were capable, resilient, and worthy of respect. Myra looked at Jake, a smile on her face. "You have done more than survive. You have taught us a lesson about courage, strategy, and intelligence. That is why humans endure. That is why we must respect them." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. Humans had always survived by thinking beyond the obvious, by adapting to circumstances, and by using courage and intelligence as weapons. Today, those traits had earned him the respect of an entire alien force. The sun climbed higher, warming the forest. The warriors began to withdraw slowly, leaving the clearing clear and peaceful. The chief gave one final nod, signaling the end of immediate hostilities. Humans had survived, not through force, but through ingenuity and courage. Myra stepped forward, standing beside Jake. "You have proven what humans can do," she said quietly. "Not by fighting, but by thinking, by acting, and by earning respect. That is why your species endures." Jake looked around the clearing, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. 200 warriors had surrounded him, yet he had survived and earned respect. Humans had always survived in impossible circumstances because of courage, intelligence, and adaptability. Today had proven it once more. The forest was quiet now, calm and peaceful. The cabin stood intact. The warriors had withdrawn but were watching from a distance, their stance respectful rather than aggressive. Humans had earned their place, not through weapons or numbers, but through ingenuity, courage, and understanding. Jake turned to Myra. "This is only the beginning," he said. "Humans will continue to survive, adapt, and earn respect wherever we go. Today, we have proven it again." Myra nodded, feeling pride, respect, and curiosity. She had witnessed the humans' courage and intelligence firsthand. Humans were more than she had ever imagined: clever, brave, adaptable, and worthy of respect. And in that quiet moment, with the sun high in the sky and the forest peaceful around them, a silent understanding formed. Humans had survived, thrived, and earned respect, not by strength alone, but through intelligence, courage, and the ability to connect and adapt. The standoff was over. The humans had survived. The warriors had learned. And the frontier had been forever changed by the ingenuity and bravery of a single human scout.